Welcome to the Science of CX podcast. My name is Steve Pappas, a former serial entrepreneur turned CX obsessed expert. And each week we bring you an inspiring message and insight into how customer experience can catapult your business to soar, grow, and accelerate beyond what you thought was possible. We seek out experts to interview and help you on your journey to CX in the science of CX. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Science of CX. I'm Steve Pappas, your host. Unfortunately, Angela can't make it with us today, so I'm flying solo today. But we've got a great show for you. You know, as always, we really do search for people that can provide their expertise in all areas of customer experience and employee experience. And today we have a very special show for you. Today we have Jordan Hirsch on. And I'll tell you a little more about Jordan after we get to say hello to him. So welcome to the show, Jordan.
Hello, Steve. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to talk about this subject. So I'll clue people in just a little bit. We're going to be talking about some improv. Now, did that scare anybody off yet? Please don't shut us out yet. This is going to be good. So let me tell you a little bit about Jordan. So Jordan Hirsch helps people and organizations say yes and. You're going to learn what that means in a little bit later, but say yes and to change. He's the Director of Innovation at Phase 2, which is a digital experience agency where he guides clients through digital transformation. As a longtime improv actor, you know we're going to talk about that, and teacher with decades of experience in web development and digital strategy, Jordan uses improv tools and concepts to infuse digital transformation projects with playful and powerful experiences that help teams unleash their potential and get excited about their future. Well, Jordan, we've got a lot to cover because just in your bio alone, I've got multiple questions just jumping right at me.
Bring it on.
Let's talk a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about Phase 2, but let's talk about improv for a moment, because I'm sure that's probably an area that many of our listeners have not thought about somehow introducing improv into the employee experience, the employee engagement, or the customer experience. So first of all, tell us what improv really is, because I think some people think it's stand-up comedy, but it's not.
It's definitely not stand-up comedy, nor is it being forced to get up on stage and play games with an improv troupe in front of an audience. I mean, those are that might surface during an improv show, but to me, what improv is really the practice of listening, accepting, and building on what's come before. It's not dissimilar to yoga, I think, in that way, in terms of the idea of being all about accepting reality, not fighting back against it, and building on a shared foundation of reality with other people. Does that sound too highfalutin to be to match up to the last improv show you might have seen, in a bar basement back in your 20s?
Yeah, I think I'm already lost because I can't do yoga. That's for sure. My body does not contort like a pretzel at all. But I'm wondering whether or not my mind can work out improv, though. And to me, it sounds like something that could be really fascinating for heads of organizations and for management teams to start to adopt. So maybe we can, now that we understand it's not stand-up comedy, most people have seen improv in one shape or another. I think Whose Line Is It Anyway? With the Colin Mockery and Ryan Stiles and those guys, they're basically handed something, whether it's a scene or it's a product or something, and they build around it, right? So
exactly.
So let's talk about what that really entails. And do you need a certain type of mind, or can anybody do it?
Anybody can do it, but you do need practice. We are not trained to necessarily accept what comes to us, right? Especially when it comes to leaders, right? Leaders are trained to push back against the status quo and, fight against what came before, lead a revolution. But all of that, I think, can still be grounded in this idea of accepting reality. So in that example of whose line is it anyway, if I hand you an invisible thing, right, and I say, this is a noisemaker, and you guys have 2 minutes to build a scene around this noisemaker, an improviser can't then turn back to me and say, noisemaker's not great. Can you give me something else? How about a keyboard or a fan? No, the reality has already been established, right, in front of an audience. This is a noisemaker. Deal with it. And to me, that's kind of the fundamental tenet of improv is this is reality. Deal with it. Deal with it might mean we're going to take this noisemaker and I'm going to reach down into my toolbox and grab a screwdriver and I'm going to jam the screwdriver into the end and start unscrewing and take the pieces apart and turn it into something completely different. And by the end, I have a confetti cannon because I've built on what came before. I have the parts of a noisemaker, right? I have a cone, I have some paper, I have little strips of tissue paper coming out of the end maybe. So to me, that is kind of the key to improv, is accepting what has been established, and frankly, a key to life is accepting what has been established and building on it. That doesn't mean that you agree with something, right? When I teach organizations about improv or teams about improv, if I say, okay, you're going to practice building on each other's ideas, it doesn't mean that if you say an idea that I think is terrible, I have to say, well, okay, I guess we're going to do Steve's terrible idea now. How do we move forward with this? But I have to find the germ of truth in that idea that is meaningful to you. And I have to accept, this is what we're talking about, yes and, right? You mentioned yes and at the beginning. It's in my bio. The yes is accepting that you believe in this idea that you put forth. Doesn't mean that I say, yes, this is a great idea. It says, yes, Steve really believes in this thing he just said. What can I find in this? Is there some kernel of this idea that I can add something to build onto? And through that building process is how I believe people and teams can really get the best results. So to me, improv is all about collaboration. It's all about listening. It's about accepting, and it's about building. It's not about agreeing with each other all the time. It's about, in fact, very often it's about the art of constructive disagreement.
Okay. All right. So take us through, how does this aid organizations in brainstorming problems with teams? So we'll go down this path first. How does it help organizations brainstorming problems, but also let's add the complexity of the customer in there too?
So we'll start with the customer piece. Your customers feel about you the way that they do. I think Domino's is actually a really interesting example here when it comes to yes and. If you'll remember several years back, Domino's had this whole campaign where they finally admitted publicly the fact that everybody hates their crust, or everybody hated their crust, right? For years, that was the one thing anybody universally could agree on. Hey, Domino's pizza, oh yeah, terrible crust, tastes like cardboard, right? Maybe this is a New York bias, but everybody that I knew certainly hated the crust of Domino's. And I remember very clearly they had an ad campaign where they actually started acknowledging the fact that nobody liked their crust. They started talking about it, and they said, you know what? We're going to change it. And to me, that is yes and in action. They could have ignored it. They could have pushed back against it and said, no, everybody loves our crust. What do you mean? All the customers you interviewed, all the people who filled out this feedback survey, those guys are crazy, right? Ignore all these NPS scores. We're surveying the wrong group. But they didn't do that. They actually listened, and they accepted the underlying reality, and they built upon it. They said, how are we going to end this yes, people hate our crust, and maybe we can change it. Maybe it's finally time to change the recipe. So I think that's one really shining example for me about how yes and that kind of concept, that mindset can really come in handy for a company and be a really powerful tool. Doesn't mean it's easy. That yes part can hurt a lot because you have to accept reality, and accepting reality is one of the hardest things. I think it's one of the hardest parts of growing up. And even a lot of grown-ups have a hard time accepting reality. There's certainly days where I don't want to face it. But in terms of brainstorms, too, I feel like that is the first step to me in a successful brainstorm. Before you even get to everybody's great ideas and building on each other's ideas and collaborating is, can we all agree and accept on, or can we all agree on and accept the fundamental problem that we're brainstorming around? right? Our customers hate our crust. Our customers aren't buying our products. Our customers are dissatisfied with the service they're getting. Our marketing team and our sales team have different definitions of things, and we've pretended for 2 years that they don't, but they do, and it's beginning to surface in the customer experience, right? Those internal cracks, I believe, will always end up surfacing in the customer experience. And being able to acknowledge that, to me, is that first step of then actually being able to brainstorm around solutions to it. And then once you're into the brainstorming, again, it's not about agreeing with everybody's idea. It's about agreeing that someone believes in the idea they put forth and finding something in it that you can build on. And this is not a simple or easy thing to do. It's very easy to say, and it's very easy to talk about, but it's really hard to actually do in practice. And it takes a lot of practice. I really do think anyone who works in any sort of job, in any professional environment, should go take an improv class, because you're not learning how to get up on stage and be funny, but you are learning how to listen and how to kind of accept and build a shared reality with other people. And that's what a workplace is. That's what a family is. That's what a conversation is. It is building on a shared reality. And I feel like where we get into trouble is when we don't agree on reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is interesting because, it takes. We've talked with many of our guests on what it really takes to make CX work. It really takes a very introspective management team that is willing to accept its flaws and really listen to not only the surveys and the metrics, but the verbatims behind them as to what people are saying. What is the reason for this? What is the result of this? And why are they going somewhere else, et cetera? So it really takes that introspective. So I think you're pulling that out, but you're pulling it out in a different way. It doesn't feel as formal. It feels more friendly and fun, and it's a team builder at the same time, which is not typically what consulting companies do, because they're in there and saying, why? They bring out their inner 5-year-old. They always try to get to root cause. Well, why is that? And why is that? Why do you think that is? And why are that? So I think maybe you're definitely onto a better approach that really solves multiple issues within an organization. So if we get to that, we get to the brainstorming, we talked about the customer, but let's talk about how does it help us in our storytelling? Because now you've got a team, maybe you've got the head of the organization or the leadership team, as well as people below them, and I don't know how many layers down. They're side by side, shoulder to shoulder, so to speak, but how does that get us to maybe where we can provide a better story in the end, and we can turn that into better messaging for the organization? Because that'll be one of the results that comes out of it, that then we'll be looking at where does that get infused into the customer journey map also. Yeah.
So absolutely a helpful skill for storytelling, particularly because a company has to tell a story as a group. Right? There's probably somebody who owns the story. There's a team who works on that story, but everybody has to carry it out. And people aren't always going to read off of the company hymnal when they're out in front of customers. So I feel like the more you practice kind of yes-anding each other, and the more you practice really listening to each other, this is an area I feel like where active listening can be really handy. Active listening is about listening beyond just the words that are being said. It's listening for nonverbal cues. It's listening for body language, tone of voice, where someone's eyes are, right, when they're speaking to you. And it can also be about listening to the things that are not said and listening for context across multiple conversations. So if you are doing a good job actively listening to the people inside your organization who are crafting the story, you will get the heart of it, even if you get the words wrong when you get out there. So you take that and you pair it with this idea of yes and suddenly you have a lot more to say yes to. The more information you take in, for example, in an improv scene, if my scene partner takes the stage and is holding their body a certain way, and maybe I see someone who's looks like maybe they're holding a briefcase, right, and they're looking at their watch a bunch, and they keep looking down the street, right? All these cues now are adding up, and I can intuit you're waiting for a bus and you're late for work. That may not be at all what they had in their head, but that's what my active listening is telling me. So that's what I'm going to say in the scene, and now it becomes true. So that is the first step of building this story together, is listening for what's already there. So listening to that customer feedback, listening to the voice of the customer, listening beyond just the surveys, but like you were saying, to actual quotes, actual snippets from real human beings. That's that first level of listening, and you apply active listening to that, and you can really start to get a picture of, oh, what does our story have to be to change our perception if that's what we need to do? How can we start to fill in the gaps in the experience that we're creating for people? Then we can begin to build together. We can begin to brainstorm together about what story do we need to be telling? What story do we need to be creating that will actually serve our customers? Listen, it all comes down to listening. If you're not listening, I don't think you can be successful in customer experience, and you certainly can't be successful as an improviser. If I ignore all those cues, and I use the word listening, but if I'm, so far I'm describing all these nonverbal things, but to me, that's all part of active listening. If I ignore all those cues and I come out and I say, oh, you off to the farm? Right? The audience is going to be really confused. My scene partner is going to be really confused. I gave you all these clues that I was waiting for a bus and late for work. What do you mean off to the farm?
Right.
If they're experienced improvisers, right, they can make it work. But if we're putting a story out into the world as an organization that is incongruous with the reality that our customers are experiencing, it will produce that same disjointed sensation. And people will have a really hard time latching onto our story because it won't be believable. It will not match their lived experience with a brand, with an organization, with a service, with a tool, with whatever it is.
Perfect. So, Jordan, I'm going to have to take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back with Jordan Hirsch.
Panviva has 25 years of empowering customer service, and we have deep expertise in how people actually use information, from our roots in learning and performance. We offer accurate, consistent information on demand to every channel, most relevant knowledge at your people's exact moment of need, integrated, streamlined internal processes, systems that deliver memorable and remarkable customer experiences that boost customer attention and loyalty every time, and knowledge that extends across your entire digital landscape. To learn more, visit Panviva at www.panviva.com.
And we're back talking to Jordan Hirsch about improv. So this has been fascinating. And once we get into it a little further, I'm going to give you some of the feedback when I tried it myself for you. But so let's get a little more operational if we can, because there are a lot of people listening that run contact centers, they run customer service groups. So I'm wondering, how can you use improv in tough situations when customers are having problems with a product or their service, or something's not working, and they finally resort to, all right, I got an extra hour. I guess I could call into the contact center, do the dance and try to figure it out. But so a lot of times people, when they call into a contact center, they're already predisposed they're probably in a negative mood. So how do you diffuse that? Can you use improv there?
Absolutely. I'll teach you one of my favorite phrases, or a few of my favorite phrases to use in difficult conversations. I call on improv all the time in a difficult conversation. The first one is help me understand. Right? Somebody is speaking to you. They are angry. They are riled up. I had to go through 4 levels of customer service. I finally get to talk to you. There's a problem with my bill. And maybe you're not actually getting what's going on. You can sort of defuse that situation with a quick, help me understand. That takes the onus, it puts the onus on you of kind of being the dumb one, in a sense. You are taking yourself down a notch by saying, you are admitting, I don't really understand what it's like to be you in this moment right now. And it can sometimes stop someone in their tracks and get them to slow down a bit and to sort of share with you. They're sharing their feelings with you if you're actively listening, with their voice and possibly with the words they're saying, but not necessarily in a way that lets you help. So help me understand, I think, is a really powerful phrase to start to defuse a situation. It's not a magic bullet. It will not solve everything, but it can get someone to slow down a bit and to start to walk you through exactly where they have been so that you can then bring your full empathy to bear in those scenarios. And empathy, to me, builds on another improv tool, which is mirroring. We practice this a lot in improv rehearsal because it helps you build characters. You watch another person, you watch another actor in a scene, and you try to do exactly what they're doing, right? You try to adopt how are they feeling right now. And I know customer service people must get training in empathy. And if they don't, I feel like they're going to have a really hard time doing their jobs. But if you can start to mirror a little bit, start to walk through that journey with them. Hey, let me understand what you've been through. Okay, I see why you're really frustrated right now. I can't pretend that you're not experiencing this problem. I think we've all been on that call. I've certainly been on tech support calls where someone's like, well, it's working on my computer. Oh, okay, thanks. That really doesn't do much for me. So there's the yes and again. There's that yes. Like, yes, you are really experiencing this problem. And yes, it is incredibly frustrating. And maybe I can't actually solve it for you on this call. And I'm going to admit that openly. And I might get yelled at for a minute. But the more honest and transparent I am about what I can do for you and what I can't do for you, I feel like people will start to really understand that there's a human being on the other end of this call. Right? Sometimes you have to go off script. I mean, obviously in improv, there is no script. And I'm sure customer service managers out there are pulling their hair out at the idea potentially of their people going off the script. But that's where human connection happens. People know when they're being read to from a script and it doesn't feel right. Because in that conversation, one of you got the pages ahead of time and the other one of you is improvising. The person who called, they're improvising. They are probably not reading from a script where they're describing the problem that they're having with your product or your brand. So when one person has a script and the other's improvising, the scene is not going to work. So if you can bring yes and to that situation, yes, you are really having a problem. Yes, our product really let you down. And here's what I can do to help you. Maybe I can't solve your problem, but maybe I can give you something else. And you've helped me understand where you're coming from and what you're experiencing. It takes a little more time. You may not hit those numbers, to get someone off the phone at the right speed, but I can almost guarantee you will have a more satisfied customer at the end of it. And I can definitely guarantee that you will have a better customer experience that you've provided for that person.
Yeah, it strikes me as you were describing that there is a severe disadvantage to the customer in those cases when the script, because you're both using different parts of your brain. One is using the logical side because they're reading through things that were predetermined for them that should work for most cases, and the other is probably using emotions.
Absolutely.
The other one is getting frustrated, stressed, and probably getting to that a bit of adrenaline being pumped into their bloodstream.
They're also bringing with them all the baggage of however long it's taken them to build up to making this call. And in a difficult conversation, if you can't acknowledge that baggage, you don't realize that the other person, you're saying, oh, just follow me through this door. And the other person's dragging a massive suitcase behind them that will not fit. So help me understand lets them start to open up that suitcase and unpack it a little bit so that maybe it'll fit through the door and they can go with you.
Perfect. So what other situations have you found that using improv has been able to help organizations? We talked about, the employee engagement. Maybe it's employee satisfaction to some degree because they're feeling like they're part of solutions rather than just the problems. It's listening to them listening to each other. We talked about the customer side of things and the customer service side of things. Are there other situations that you find that companies engage you for to uncover?
Yes. Even if they're not asking for improv specifically, I find anytime I'm embarking on a discovery phase for a digital project or for a strategy project, for example, I will bring improv with me starting right at the kickoff meeting. Sometimes it's just in how I'm handling the room, how I'm reading the room, how I'm reacting to people, turning to someone at the table who maybe made an offhand comment and saying, oh, tell me more about that. Help me understand where that's coming from, or repeating something back to them, right? Using my active listening to try to start discovering things that I will need to know even before I'm asking them questions off of my script. And sometimes I'll actually lead people through activities. So if a team is going to be facing change, for example, I might lead them through some improv games where they get to practice changing together or reacting to change together or doing something weird and uncomfortable. This is hard to do at a kickoff. I don't do it. I don't do it at everyone. Not everybody's ready for it. I don't, frankly, always walk into the room with the confidence to do it with a room full of people who weren't expecting it. But if a team will go along with me on that journey, I think they get a ton of value out of it, because you get to practice all the things that are going to happen, the emotions you're going to go through on a real project, right? The fear of change, the devastation of loss, dealing with all these things, but in a totally safe environment, and maybe even have a little fun while you're doing it. And I think teams will sort of come out stronger on the other end of that. I love to play games with groups. Sometimes we'll do something like an improvised product brainstorm, just to get people's brains warmed up, where I have a set of questions that I'll go through with a team, where you just have people shout out, okay, guys, give me the industry for our product. Okay, air travel, great. What is the thing? What's the thing that we're going to build? It's a fat airplane. I choose fat airplane. I think someone recently I did one of these where someone did a fat sneaker. I forget why, okay, but that phrase stuck with me. Okay, great. What's the name of the fat airplane? Oh, it's called, the Flying Tubby. Okay, great. We've got that. Who's the target market? Who's the celebrity spokesperson? What are some of the benefits? What are its competitors? How does it beat the competitors? I'll even do the advanced version where we have the scandal that brings down the celebrity spokesperson. Then we have the backup celebrity spokesperson. We'll even do a jingle sometimes that people have to sing. And the point is not that's how we're going to construct the thing that we're building or the project that we're working on, but it's practicing all the skills with your brain that are going to help you get through the real challenges that are coming. And it helps a team. But I hate that phrase, team bonding. It gets overused, but it really does help a team start to bond, because when you can be silly together, that means you're also being vulnerable together. And when you're vulnerable together, that can build psychological safety, that can build trust, that can let people take risks. It helps out 4 weeks in when somebody speaks up and says, well, actually, I didn't want to say anything, but this is going to be a risk. This is something that we need to know about, and it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to put it out there in the room. Yep. So to me, improv is really valuable for helping teams start to build that safety with each other early on in a process, especially if it's people who don't work together very often or who are stuck in a particular way of working and need to break out of it.
Well, I'm firing these things out at you, and we didn't prepare them, so thank you for going with me. I've got one more. I do a lot of speaking in the course of a year. Well, I should take that back. I used to do a lot of speaking in front of large audiences, and I'm not a joke teller. I might be a storyteller, but I'm not necessarily a joke teller. Is there any tips you could give me, or of course, many of our listeners are also speakers in their own right, but any tips that you could give us for speakers up on a stage that have an audience in the palm of their hand, whether a keynote or breakout sessions, and can use improv to gain the trust and build the relationship and get that audience on your side quickly?
Oh, I like that. As a speaker myself, something that I like to do is I like to open my talks with a show of hands question, right? Who here has had to use a CRM on their last project and had trouble with it? Who here has had to deal with a troubling stakeholder on a project, right? Depending what the talk is about. And I ask that question because I know what the answer is going to be, right? Everybody's going to raise their hand or nobody's going to raise their hand. Those are my kind of questions. And I think a chance to use improv to build some trust is when I get an answer that I wasn't expecting. Half the room raises their hand and the other half doesn't. And again, I could choose to ignore that. I could pretend I didn't see it, but people are going to know when I go to my next slide and I'm like, well, as all of you experienced, right, from that show of hands, or I can diverge from what I've written down on my slides and I can say, I was not expecting that. Hey, random person in the audience, tell me more. Can you help me understand? Why didn't you raise your hand for that? Fascinating. It's not the easiest thing to do. And you're going to get some weird stuff that you didn't expect. They teach lawyers, right? Don't ask a question in the courtroom unless you know the answer. Don't pitch to a room if you haven't already sold them. But it's incredibly, incredibly powerful and valuable, I think, in terms of making a real human connection with your audience. They start to see you as a person, instead of just a set of slides and a voice and someone, hitting the clicker. but acknowledging those moments where something doesn't go right. I remember one of the first talks I ever gave was at a small technology conference in New York. It was a local Drupal conference. I was giving a talk about successful requirements gathering. And all of a sudden, the automated blinds in the building we were in the room, just all suddenly opened up at once. And sunlight came flooding into the room, and everybody turns their head. And in the moment, thanks to years of improv training, I said, and now it's time to shed some light on our next topic, and advance the slide. Big laugh. Everybody's won over because I didn't try to ignore the awkward thing. In improv, we say mistakes are gold. Mistakes are an opportunity to grab something new that we weren't expecting. Because even though we're making it up on the fly, we don't have a script, you're definitely, a portion of your brain in an improv scene is thinking 5 or 6 steps ahead because you have to, right? That's how you know where you're going. But the other half has to be really listening because something could change at any moment. I can't control what my scene partner is going to say. I can't control when the blinds are going to go off. I can't control when a product launch bombs and the focus group hates it. So being able to accept those things and immediately say yes and to them in the moment, to me, those are the real opportunities to win over a crowd and to get them on your side. A talk where everything goes great, it always feels good to me. But frankly, I do often end up feeling like, it would have been kind of cool if something unexpected had happened. You know, we do all this preparation to make sure nothing unexpected happens, but it's those moments that are really, really gold. Particularly in an improv scene, and I think in sort of any situation with other people, when you can embrace the strange thing that happened, when you can really grab hold of that mistake and build on it, that's when you start to win people over, I think, in an entirely different way. It goes beyond being prepared, and it shows that you're being a person. You're being vulnerable. It's hard to accept that something weird just happened in the middle of this talk you've spent a month preparing for, but it's also really human. It's really human to point it out.
I think that's just brilliant because there are so many people that are probably up there and the slides aren't even advancing, or the remote is not working, or the microphone is the battery just died on the microphone pack that you've got behind you. And it's interesting to embrace, for the speaker to embrace those moments, think quickly, and see how can they work that into their talk. How is that an example of what I was going to be talking about and things like that? It's just, it's brilliant. I mean, I've tried to learn over the years various techniques and tricks for large and small venues. The smaller venues I find are a lot easier. The 40 to 100 maybe people, but when it's really large, it's that can be unwieldy. I've always used, and I know we're gonna go long on time, but I've always used a trick. I call it a trick, but a tip for our listeners is that I always ask people first to tell me their path not taken. I always ask the question. So if you weren't doing what you're doing and you're here at this conference. Around healthcare or around banking or around technology or whatever it is, what would you be doing? Yeah. If you could wave a magic wand, what's your path not taken? And you get people that will raise their hand and they'll say, I wanted to be a marine biologist. I wanted to work with dolphins. I wanted to work with this. I wanted to work as a veterinarian. I wanted to be a musician. On and on and on. So then what I do is I say, okay, everybody stand up. I want my musicians over on this table. I want my animal lovers on this table. I want my artists over on this table. And why do I do it? Because now all of a sudden you can network with people with like interests quickly, breaks the ice fast. But I love the idea of finding a mistake or finding something, because in the course of moving people around, I mean, this whole thing takes like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
In the course of moving people around, things do happen.
Of course.
And now I just got to remember that in that split second, use it to our advantage.
Always use it. You can't really get away with pretending it didn't happen. In an improv show, we talk about this idea that the second you take a footstep on stage, the show has begun. Even if you're not ready to be in character and start a scene until you've gotten to center stage, it doesn't matter. The audience saw you enter. They don't know. They assume you've got a plan. So as soon as something happens in front of the audience, it's real now. It's part of the show. As soon as something happens when you're speaking, it's real. It's part of the show. It's all part of the act, folks. right? That old line is really true. The more you can make it part of the act, the more real you become in their eyes, and then they want you to succeed.
Yeah, you always answer with, I planned that. In your mind, I planned that.
I planned
Somehow I willed it to happen. Well, Jordan, this has been great. We've been giving lots of great, valuable morsels of information for our audience, but let's go a step further. What kind of homework can we give them? What kind of games? Everybody is probably getting together on Zoom calls, every night or a couple nights a week. Their whole team is on a Zoom call, and they're probably, just shooting the breeze, talking about what they did for the day, what they did for the week, etc. But, can you do something on Zoom or Teams or whatever you're using that can bring that team together, that they've been working from home for a long time now? They probably have not figured out how to separate work from home. And they need to escape a little bit.
Yeah,
right.
Those lines get blurry. So I'll teach you, or I'll talk about one game that I think maybe you've tried, and I want to hear about it afterwards, which is the Yes and Party Planning game. And it builds on this core improv concept of yes and I actually didn't learn it in improv class. I learned it in a facilitation class I took from Daniel Stillman, a master facilitator. And what you do is you're going to break everybody up into pairs. Right? It can work even with just a few people. You break everybody up into pairs. If you're on Zoom, you can use breakout rooms, which take a little getting used to, but you just set up 2 people per room, and they are going to they're going to plan a party in these pairs. Right? Everybody's going to plan a birthday party, and you've got 2 instructions. The first one is everything that the first person says in the party planning session, the second person is going to answer with yes, but. Yes, but. Oh, we'll have a walnut cake. Yes, but what if someone has allergies? Okay. So you set them off into their rooms, give them a minute or two. As the facilitator, you can hop around rooms, make sure people are using yes, but with each other. Bring everybody back together and see how the parties went. How far did you get in the planning? Did you have any fun? What did it feel like? The second step is we're going to go back into our rooms, except now you're going to answer every line with yes and, each person. Right? We're going to have a walnut cake. Yes, and we're going to put sprinkles on top, a big mountain of them. See how far you get. Give them a couple minutes and bring them back. And in 2 minutes, I think you will find people come up with the most outrageous, ridiculous party ideas. I believe when I first did this exercise, my partner and I ended with a unicorn cannon atop a cake that shot out live unicorns that would then, walk around the party and give rides to people. It's kind of amazing. But we never would have gotten there if we hadn't been yes-anding each other. And again, it comes back to the thing I was saying earlier in a brainstorm, for example. It doesn't mean that every step we had along the way was brilliant, but saying yes and to those steps gets us to somewhere we never would have gotten individually. And it's a very simple game. It doesn't take very long. And it also practices that kind of core skill of yes and for people. It breaks them out of our typical mindset. Because very often we treat ideas at work, unfortunately, like a bit of a zero-sum game. Oh, well, if your idea advances, my idea can't. Right? But what if I build on your idea? Then maybe we both win. Maybe we make the whole pie bigger instead of fighting over a slice, is how I like to look at it.
Great tip. It's a great exercise, and I have to tell you that I did this very exercise with my team about a week and a half ago, and we were roaring. We were absolutely roaring. There were tears. It was so funny. The yes, but was definitely a limiting. A limiting exercise, and people were coming back saying we couldn't agree on anything. All we agreed upon was beer.
The universal
right. But then when it was yes and, I'll tell you, every team had the most imaginative things at this party that I couldn't even believe. And this happened over the course of, there were 6 teams. Maybe it was 20 minutes total. But ever since then, they said, when are we doing it again?
Oh, that's wonderful.
So they want to do it again. Anyway, Jordan, this has been great. I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you. So, they could get to you at phase 2, which is at phase2technology.com. And that's a digital experience agency.
Yes. We create digital experience that advances the human experience. We've got a team of experts at Phase 2. We guide our clients through digital transformations, and we try not just to focus on being great at technology and strategy, but really focusing on the human side of the things that we're implementing and that we're talking about as well. So a lot of improv goes on in our work.
And let's also not forget that you also have Think Improv, which is thinkimprov.com, which is a corporate and team improv company that you have with your wife.
Yes, my wife and I have been improvising together for, well, we would say our entire marriage, but professionally, probably for about 15 years now. And yeah, we go around to organizations and teams and help them practice these skills so they can get stronger every day, because we all have to work with other people.
That's funny, because marriage is an improv, and so isn't parenthood an improv.
Absolutely.
There's no scripts there.
No.
You've got to figure it out, and you got to work through all the different ways that something can happen.
Mm-hmm. You get two improvisers in the house. I mean, we'll say things to each other like, "You need to yes and me right now," but it's
That's
really
great.
valuable.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Jordan, for joining us today, and I hope all of our audience has had a little break from the typical work from home, and they've been able to learn more about, really how to check things at the door and look inward and work with teams and work with others, so that we can all come out of this a little bit better when we do. So, Jordan, please stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks again for joining us.
You too. Thank you for having me, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Take care, everyone. You've been listening to The Science of CX. My name is Steve Pappas. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, the highest compliment that you can give us is to subscribe, rate, and review The Science of CX. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.